As Johnny was sharing that message, it immediately conjured up for me one of my favorite quotes by Sigmund Freud that says, "Love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness." And at least what I took away from Johnny's message is this fusion, empathetic leadership, as he calls it, of this fusion of love, not romantic love, companionship and work, and really bringing those together. And I think that so appropriately sets the stage for our next speaker. I am just absolutely thrilled to bring up to the stage Shasta Nelson. And I just want to share a little bit about Shasta and we don't have enough time for me to go through all of her accomplishments and accolades. She is the author of not only one, three different books. Friendships Don't Just Happen, The Guide to Creating a Meaningful Circle of Girlfriends, The Business of Friendship, Making the Most of Our Relationships Where We Spend Most of Our Time, and her latest, Frientimacy, How to Deepen Relationships for Lifelong Health and Happiness. In addition to being a three-time author, she is a sought-after contributor for organizations and publications, like the Harvard Business Review, the New York Times, Fast Company, and Forbes, just to name a few. She was a guest on the Steve Harvey Show, which if you have not had an opportunity to see that, I'd recommend it. It's awesome. And I want to share a quote that comes from one of Shasta's clients. And I'm actually going to share the quote, and then I'm going to share a quick little revision of it. The head of enterprise learning and development at Farmers Insurance said that Shasta is rapidly becoming to friendship what Brene Brown is to courage. And the only adjustment I would make is Shasta isn't becoming, she is that. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Shasta Nelson.
Oh, thank you. What a great introduction. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you for having me. When he asked me about this event, I was like, what? I get to come speak to the choir? Like, this is my perfect event. You have to know, as a friendship expert, I'm often brought up on stages. Last week, I was at the Auto Repair Shop Owners Conference, and I'm walking up on stage to like hundreds of auto repair people, and they're like, you can see it in their faces. Why do we have a friendship expert here? I walk into leadership conferences, sales conferences, and it's usually because of one visionary person that said, oh yeah, at the bottom of everything we care about in business is healthy relationships. But it's often the audiences that are kind of like, until I start talking and we get them. But I get to come in to an audience that already knows the value of relationships, who chose to come here because of the name, because of the concept, because of the content and the great work that Brian and so many others are doing. And to have such an incredible lead up by Dr. Lieberman talking about so much of the science behind this, I am so honored to be with all of you. And I'm going to just Dr. Lieberman gave us a great intro to a lot of the statistics when I talk about loneliness. And so I'm going to go through that part relatively quickly. But he did talk about how, let me make sure my slides are working. Good. You guys can see my slides there? Awesome. So he highlighted this statistic that 61% of people are feeling lonely on a regular basis in the workplace. And this is pre-COVID. I want to keep the statistic up to show you the date. This is before we were all working from home. The need is so real. This is the equivalent of us sending 61% of kids to school with hungry stomachs. We know they don't learn as well when they are hungry. We have programs in place to help feed them. Loneliness, by definition, is our body sending us a message that we have more desire to be supported, connected, known, and loved in our lives. It's a physical need. It's a biological need. The same way you have thirst when your throat feels parched when you're thirsty, when you yawn, when you're sleepy, when your stomach growls when you're hungry. When you feel that pang of loneliness, it is your body telling you that you need more connection. Unfortunately, a lot of us call that, oh, I must be bored, or, oh, I must be hungry, and we go open the door to the fridge. But most of us will have greater capacity and way more hunger, and not just for more social talk, not just for more small connections. Most of us, when we're lonely, it's because we want to be known and loved and in deeper ways supported. So this is a really, really big issue in our workplaces with everybody that you're interacting with, that you're working with, and your clients. And it impacts us in so many ways. This is a study done by Dr. Niven out of the University of Ohio, I believe. He went and took all of the studies around happiness back when he was working on a book for this. And he was saying, you know, a lot of us think that happiness is kind of nebulous or personal or, you know, kind of shifts for different people. Not so. He said, you took all the studies, and 70% of our happiness comes down to the quality and quantity of our relationships. 70%. For one hot moment, think about all the things you think you need to make you happy. And where it's like, I'd like that car. I would like to be that dress size. I would like that promotion. And that all adds up to 30%. This is a really big deal. If we want a happy, healthy workforce, we cannot do it without relationships. Physical health. This is one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Dean Ornish. I am not aware of any factor other than intimacy and love in medicine, not diet, like just let that sink in for a second, not smoking, not exercise, not stress, not genetics, not drugs, not surgery, that has a greater impact on our quality of life, incidence of illness, and premature death from. If you were in my audience, I would say, how many causes? And you would all say all. It's all the causes. That's a lot of them. That's massive. Now more and more doctors are coming on the scene talking about this. Dr. Dean Ornish is one of the ones who at the beginning has been really hammering this for us. Now we've got Dr. Vivek Murthy, our US Surgeon General, talking about how loneliness is the biggest public health issue of our time. We've got people like Dr. Lieberman who are showing us what it's doing in the brain. We scientifically can confirm that for as much as our health magazines are still saying you need to do these crunches and drink these green smoothies, we can say for certain that yes, we want you to be healthy and all the different lifestyle things that are out there, for sure. The studies show that when you do healthy lifestyle habits and feel connected, you have the best longevity and quality of health for sure. But the second highest performing group are those who have unhealthy lifestyle habits defined by not exercising, not eating healthy, and smoking. And if they feel connected, if they live a life feeling supported, they actually outperform, they live longer, they have higher quality of life, they have less disease than the people who have healthy lifestyle habits but feel disconnected. This is a big deal. And Dr. Lieberman showed us some of how big of a deal it is. This is also from other longitudinal studies where they are saying this is worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, worse than being a lifelong alcoholic, worse than not exercising, worse than obesity. And let me just say for a second, loneliness in and of itself isn't killing us. So it's not that just feeling lonely does this damage. It's feeling lonely and not getting the need met. Just like we can feel hungry and we're not going to die. In fact, a lot of nutritionists would tell us, don't eat until you're hungry, right? Like the goal isn't to never be hungry. The goal is to wait and feel the hunger and then get the need met. We don't need to sleep all day just because sleep is good for us. The goal is to sleep enough, wake up and do life. So the goal isn't to not be lonely, but the goal is to know that when we are lonely, we want to accurately identify it. This is called emotional intelligence, is the ability to name what we're feeling and do something about it. And so if we don't label it the right thing, if we say, well, I'm just bored or I'm hungry, we're going to go do a different strategy, right? We're going to go open the fridge or go just kind of stay busy and scroll down on our phones. The truth of the matter is that say, ooh, that might be me wanting more support. That might be me wanting to feel known. That might be me having a desire to feel more respected or more appreciated. And when we can name that, then we can do the second part of emotional intelligence, which is then how to get that need met. Because it's the not getting the need met that does this damage. And so what we don't want is a workforce, is us, or our clients, our employees feeling the long-term effects of not getting their needs met. And without no shock to anybody here, because this is what we're talking about, the number one factor for job satisfaction. I saw study after study after study in my book, The Business of Friendship, Making the Most of Our Relationships, where we spend most of our time, just came out 2 years ago. And when I was working on that book, I was pulling all of the studies together. And without doubt, we do need purpose at work. We do need to feel like we're part of the team. There's a lot of things we need. We need compensation, and study after study edged out where if we want to feel like we belong and feel connected to our colleagues, And in fact, there are some studies that actually show that we will take a pay cut if it means liking who we work with, versus we won't take 10,000 extra dollars to work with somebody that we can't stand. We like intrinsically know the impact that working with people has on our lives, and and all of us have probably had that experience. You can have like your dream job on paper, and all it takes is somebody who's just super annoying, frustrating, and just kind of like poking at you, and you'll come home every day just being like, oh. And conversely, you know what it's like to have a job where you're kind of like, I don't know, maybe this isn't like the best job in the world, but I love who I work with. We've had those experiences. We know what a big difference it makes to our happiness, to our health. When I come in and do studies with organizations and I have a assessment that they all take, it's amazing. I can test them on how happy they are at work and how engaged they are and all their different relationships. And then you just ask the question, do you have a best friend at work? And how much do you like your team? And you ask a couple of those connecting relation questions. And without doubt, they're correlated completely. The people who are happiest at work are the people who have their friendships at work. Gallup has been telling us this for 2 decades. And yet, as a workforce, we're still kind of skeptical, which drives me crazy. I'm just like, we've got the data, we have the statistics, and yet we're still like, well, I don't know if friendship and work should intersect, and we should keep them separate. Based on what? Just a negative experience you've had? The science shows repetitively over and over and over that we show up for work more often. We don't call in and just kind of take lazy days at work as much. We're engaged. We want to have each other's backs. We treat our customers better. We have fewer workplace accidents. We have better mental health. Like, you go down the list of every single thing you want from a team, and if they have friendships at work, those things make a massive difference. In fact, Gallup says it's a 7 times more engaged. I kind of look at that and I'm like, I don't even know how I could be 2 times more engaged. 7's an awful lot. But when we look at the correlation of how retention and engagement and productivity, these are correlated to us feeling supported and respected and liked. We want to know that we matter. We want to know that there's people there that we can count on, and we want to know that they're counting on us. This matters big time. I just saw studies come out again yesterday. The numbers are a little dropping a little bit from like when I was doing the studies 2 years ago. Only about 2 out of 10 of us have a best friend at work right now. And so, yeah, about 20% of us. So this is a big need. We need to keep talking about why we need to do relationships at work, how we can make them healthy, how we can make them so that they are a win for the company and a win for the employees. The employees are going to win because they're happier, they're more engaged. The companies win because you keep them longer. They are more productive. They actually feel safer brainstorming. They feel safer problem solving. The list goes on and on and on. There is really no reason to be against friendships at work. Can we be a little nervous about some of the things? Absolutely. But the truth of the matter is, when I interview people on what are their greatest fears in the workplace, they say, well, what about favoritism or cliques or gossip? And I look at them and I say, those things happen in workplaces that are opposed to friendship and where nobody's friends too. Stopping friendship doesn't stop those problems. In fact, it exacerbates them. We will do much better addressing those kinds of fears and problems we have when we're actually training people how to have good relationships and how to show up in a good way and encourage those conversations. So we can absolutely do this. I want to share with you, in our time that we have together today, I want to share with you a definition of relationship that I've brought together in my book, Friendtimacy, and I also teach it in the Business of Friendship if you want more of the workplace one. And so, yeah, write this definition down, because this is what we're aiming for in all of our relationships, is that where everybody in that team or both people in a relationship feel seen in a safe and satisfying way. And those 3 S words are what I'm going to zero in on here. A couple years ago, when I was doing some big research for healthy relationships, I took all the different studies. That Google was over here studying what makes for a healthy team, and we've got the Gottman studying healthy marriage, and we've got all these different studies. Somebody's studying friendship, and somebody else is looking at what makes the difference between a best friend? Why do we call this person a best friend versus this person? And we've got everybody defining friendship differently and studying it in different ways, which is fabulous. And I just took all of those studies and started just kind of trying to tear through them and look and see what's the positive correlation between all of these. And there's 3 requirements to every single relationship. Every study I've ever seen, you will see these 3 things present. Everything else you think of as a healthy relationship is a different word for one of these 3 things, which is fine, or an example of one of these 3 things, or the outcome of what happens when these 3 things happen. But at the end of the day, I have never seen a healthy relationship that does not have all 3 of these. And on the flip side, any relationship that's not feeling healthy or good, it's because one of these 3 things is lacking. And so this is where we can start kind of building a definition. I love, like Dr. Lieberman was talking about, bringing an app together and how we can meet people. But we can meet people all day long. And for lack of not knowing what to do with the people we meet, we won't be good friends. We've all met, you have met a lot of people you could have become really good friends with, but it's for lack of opportunity and for what we're going to talk about, these 3 requirements, that the relationship didn't happen. It's not because the 2 of you couldn't have been, it's because these 3 things didn't get landed. And so once we know these 3 things, it gives us so much information about how to start relationships, deepen them, and repair them. At the base of all healthy relationships, we have positive emotions. This one is not a surprise to any of us. Whenever we think about wanting to build more friendships in our life, it's always because we want more positive feelings. None of us are like, you know what? I just feel like I just need a little bit more pressure and guilt. And yeah, I just feel like I need more people judging me. So I'm going to make some more friends. Every single one of us, when we want friends, it's because we want more support. We want to feel more loved. We want more empathy, like Johnny was saying in the Sherm video. We want to feel more validation in our lives. We want to feel appreciated and loved. This is what humans gravitate to. In the most crass of way, we are going to like the people who help us feel liked. We are going to like the people and move toward the people and want to bond with the people who we feel better when we're around them. And so at the very base of every healthy relationship is we need to have positive emotions. Some of the studies are showing, in fact, that we have to have 5 positive emotions for every negative emotion to keep that relationship healthy. So there's stressors, there's differences, there's things that we do that annoy each other, there's big things, deadlines, and all kinds of things. There's always the stressors, but we have to have 5 pleasant emotions for every negative emotion to keep that relationship healthy. So this is a really big invitation for teams. When I come into companies and I look at and do an assessment of the positivity on teams, based on all 3 of the requirements I'm going to share with you, this one is almost always the lowest. Like 80% of the time, this is the lowest one. And so it's really important that we see that we realize that our number one job, if we want to bond people together, is we need to help them have more of these emotions. You have a little light bulb, I think, at your table there as one of your icons where you can chat with your table and put a word in there. And I invite you right now to take one of these words and just type in that one word. Which one word here, or a different word, a pleasant emotion, would you like to feel more of in your job? Like you just look at this list and go, oh, I would love to feel more excitement or inspiration. It's been a long time since I felt that. Which one of these words would you just like a little bit more of in your job, in your work, in your team? And pop that into that light bulb there. It's fun to see which ones are similar, which ones are different. But at the end of the day, every single one of us are going to want to bond with the people who give us more pleasant emotions. So our number one job description as a friend is, am I leaving this person feeling better about themselves and their life for having been in my presence? And for managers of teams, it's the same thing. People are going to want to show up the more they feel this. We gravitate to these emotions. And so we absolutely want to make sure that we have as many pleasant emotions going on as possible. You'll see how important this is because the second requirement of all healthy relationships is repetition. It's consistency. It's the hours that we're logging. It's the history that we're building. It's the time that we spend together. It's the memories that we're making. And just notice for a second, if the foundation, if we aren't enjoying ourselves, we aren't going to want to be repetitious. If it's not fun, we don't want to do it again. If I don't feel like you like me, I don't want to like keep showing up. And so these two build off of each other. If there's not a strong foundation of positive emotions, it's going to be very hard to get the consistency piece. The consistency piece is why we make friends at work as adults. It's why it's the number one place we make friends as adults. The top 3 places we make friends in our lives are childhood and high school and college. The 4th one is our workplaces. So once we're out of school, this is the place And it's not because we like the people we work with so much better than anybody else. It's not that we pick each other out of a lineup of options. It's that we had consistency. And this is, it's not a super sexy word because we like to think that our friendships have something to do with this magic and this chemistry and we just clicked. And the truth of the matter is, it has to do with how much you get familiar with each other and how comfortable you become with each other. And so we, as we keep seeing each other over and over and over, we will feel closer to each other. Just by meeting each other at our tables here in this conference, I would feel safer going back to the table I was at because they're familiar. Go table 3. And so, yeah, we automatically, I've known them for an hour this morning, and yet we will gravitate to the people that we have a little bit of interaction, a little bit of familiarity with. And then of course, we're not going to bond with everybody that we feel consistency with, but we'll bond with everybody that we feel consistency with when it's in conjunction with the other 2 things. And so consistency, why it felt automatic when we were kids, friendship, because the consistency was built in. Now it's because we have to attend a religious organization consistently. It's why we often give advice like volunteer or join a club or join a class or go to the gym. Anything you do consistently is going to increase your odds of building relationships in those places. But we would be remiss if we didn't take advantage of the fact that we are spending so much time with each other at work. And so we really would be, some of the studies in fact show that if you leave your workplace lonely, and I'm using leave, recognizing that a lot of us work from home, but if you're lonely throughout your day, you lose energy, and you actually, not only do you not have the time and the energy to like actually go and make up the difference in your personal life, but you actually have less desire to do it. You actually come home a little bit more exhausted and drained. And so you have less desire and ambition to go build the relationships that you need. And so this consistency, we have to get it at work. And I just listed up on the screen some of the ways that we, obviously just showing up isn't always enough. We need to ask ourselves, do our people have the space to connect? Or are we just running into group meetings all the time? Am I breaking them into smaller groups? Are there opportunities for them to meet one-on-one? Do they have our permission that this is important to us? When I was doing studies on relationships in the workplace, a lot of people want friends, but when I asked the question, does your organization want you to have friends? That number dropped in half. Like only 30-some% of us think that our organizations want us to have friends. So you might think, oh, I really want them to feel connected. But do they know that? Or do they have to feel quiet? Or do they need to kind of like being caught talking at the water cooler, so to speak? Do we feel like you're going to judge us, that we're not being productive every single second? And so one of the important things we need to do is tell them we want this, that it matters to us, that they can spend time with each other and encourage that. I love that prioritizing memorable one. We bond with people when it's not just frequency, but it's also intensity. It can also be, something that we survive together or something we accomplish together. And so when we combine the positivity, like strong emotions with that consistency, so good. So we've got these 2, we've got positive emotions and consistency. And as a side note for the men in the audience, this is how we have often conditioned men to do relationships. And I just keep apologizing on behalf of culture to all of men. And this is not just a men's thing. Women often, this is kind of what we call a social group. We have a fun time together. We get together often. We get together at the bar for the games, or we get together for girls' night, or we have a golf group, or we go out and play poker. And so we have these 2 factors together often in our culture. And for men, this is one of the things we've made a big deal about. This is how your friendships should look. And we haven't given permission, encouragement, modeling, support, and recognition that it is normal, and you're going to feel like you're missing something if for lack of the 3rd requirement, which is vulnerability. Vulnerability is where we feel seen. It's where we're sharing. It's where we feel like we're kind of know each other. It's where we feel like we're starting to hear each other's opinions and getting a feel for how each other will react in certain situations. A lot of our culture, we talk about vulnerability and we think about negative or like sharing our shame with each other. And that can certainly be a part of it. I kind of reserve that part for more at the top of the triangle. All relationships start at the bottom of the triangle. But one of the most vulnerable emotions is actually really pleasant emotions, like Brene Brown actually talks about how joy is one of the most vulnerable emotions. Humans have a hard time holding joy. The second we feel joy, we immediately start being like, well, and we kind of like do this whole like, well, I don't deserve this. I didn't really do this, or I'm not going to be able to keep it. And we kind of go into like fear mode. It takes a lot of, we can stay in sadness way longer than we can stay in joy. Other things, like when I do a lot of sharing and connecting with groups, I often have noticed that a lot of us are more comfortable complaining or talking about what's not working in our lives than we are actually talking about what is working in our lives and what we're proud of. And so vulnerability isn't just about shame, it's just about being seen for who we are. And for letting the wholeness of us be expressed in some capacity. And just to kind of close this triangle up, I just want to point out that none of us want to be vulnerable and then judged. None of us want to be vulnerable and then rejected. None of us want to be vulnerable and get that pain of like, do they like me, or do they disagree with me? And we start having all these fears. And so you have to like go right through that triangle again. The most important response to vulnerability is a pleasant emotion. And so we can keep that loop going. When anybody shares something vulnerably, what they're looking for is a pleasant emotion from us: empathy, validation, encouragement, resonance, anything we can do that just says, I'm with you. I get it. Of course, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing. I hear you. And so if we can keep that loop going, where we share a little bit about who we are and it feels good, then we'll want to do it again. So we've got the loop going. If we do it again every time, we have a little bit more consistency, a little bit more time together. We hopefully then get to know each other a little bit better on that vulnerability. And then as that vulnerability, as that loop just keeps on going. Relationships start at the bottom with low level of positivity, low level of consistency. We don't know each other really well, and low level of vulnerability. And the healthiest relationships will do all three of these things together well and keep moving through all three of these things. Commonalities play a really important role sometimes if they help us do these three things. If we both enjoy kayaking and that helps us be more consistent, then yes. If we're both CEOs of a company and we don't feel like we have very many people to share like our woes with, then vulnerability, like having that in common, will matter so much. But the beautiful thing about this is that commonalities can be accelerators, they can be excuses, they can be reasons, but we can bond with anybody. The research shows that we are just as much, have just as much a predictor of bonding if we both dislike broccoli as if we are on opposite political parties. It doesn't matter. We don't have to have every single thing in common with each other to bond. What we're looking for is, how do we treat each other? How do we leave each other feeling? And are we showing up creating relationships that leave us feeling safe? So we don't have time to go too far and too deep on this, but what I want you to do right now is I want you to look at these three things, and I want you to talk at your table for, let's do 5 minutes. So kind of quickly eyeball how many people are at your table. If you're at a table by yourself, I invite you to pop into a table with somebody else. I know it's easier to just kind of stay on the outskirts, but do need more connection, and it does bring more pleasant emotions. So if you're willing to jump over to another table, and I just want to invite you to kind of eyeball how many are at your table and recognize that if we've got 5 minutes, then maybe just a minute each if there's 5 of you, but be cognizant. And the two things I want you to just kind of be thinking about is, one, making sure everybody has a chance to share. So keep that moving. Whoever's willing to go first, just kind of pop in, and you're sharing which of these 3 factors do you wish that you want to focus on more in your team or in your experiences at work or in your relationships at work. Which one do you think would make the biggest difference if you were to kind of intentionally focus on increasing that one? Another way of asking it is, which one's lacking the most or lagging behind? And so share with each other at your table there. After somebody shares, I'm just going to invite you to just say thank you for sharing to that person. So everyone can just be like, thank you for sharing, and then move to the next person. So for 5 minutes, I invite you to connect at your tables, introduce yourself with your first name, and share which of the 3 factors you want to focus more on in your work relationships. All right. Thank you so much for sharing with each other at your table. The nice thing about this platform is I can just start talking, and I don't know if you're all still talking. Normally you have to quiet a room, but I'm just going to pretend you all are just so quiet. That's awesome. And of course, my least favorite thing to do in the world is stop people from connecting. So I'm so happy. I hope that your time together with each other was good. If we were in a big room, I would ask you for hand raise on these 3 different requirements. It's always such a good moment for all of us to realize we are definitely not alone in any one of these 3. Every single one of us has a different one to work on. You can take any relationship in your life with a spouse, or with a friend, and you can pretty quickly start looking at it and saying, yeah, we talk pretty regularly and I always enjoy them, but boy, we just really don't have that vulnerability piece. Or we have a lot of relationships. So some of us have phone calls where we see a person call on the phone and we're just like, ugh. And that's a sign that you've got like the vulnerability and consistency, but it's lacking some pleasant feelings. And so, yeah, you can start kind of identifying which one of these 3 you want to work on and repair. I realized that I neglected to show the last slide here on vulnerability before we did our table break. If this helps anybody, when a lot of times I get from people, I don't know if we want vulnerability in the workplace. And I'm like, do you want people solving problems and brainstorming? And like, oh yes. And I'm like, well, that takes an incredible amount of vulnerability to share an idea, to suggest something that might sound a little crazy or different or impossible even. Do you want people admitting when they don't know how to do something? Oh yes. Well, that takes a lot of vulnerability. Do you want people willing to try new things and to like do the things that are undoable? Yes. Okay. Do you want people being able to say yes and mean it, and also say no and mean it, without always feeling like they always have to say yes, even if they don't want to? Yes, yes, yes. We all need more vulnerability in the workplace. We've often have a negative picture of vulnerability being like just people gossiping or talking about their personal drama. And this is why we have to come in and train people for healthy relationships. Because at the bottom of our triangle, it should be positive, a foundation of positivity, some consistency, and some vulnerability. We've got a whole bunch of people, we probably, and this is being very stereotypical, but in our culture, we have often encouraged men not to be very vulnerable. And so keeping them at the bottom of the triangle, the only caveat exception we make to that is in romantic relationships. And we're like, yes, you can be vulnerable there. But yet that's not teaching, that's not setting men up. That's why I think you're dying younger than women. This is why we have to start encouraging men to practice more vulnerability in their relationships with other men, at work, in their friendships. And women, conversely, sometimes we think if we just show each other everything, if we just go straight up the triangle to top vulnerability, we'll bond and we'll feel closer. And that is not healthy vulnerability either. And so what we're looking for here is how to build healthy, meaningful relationships incrementally, so that consistency, which is what leaves us feeling safe, is in conjunction with vulnerability. So we do a tiny bit of vulnerability, and then we hopefully get pleasant reactions and meaningful, fulfilling responses, positivity. And then we want to do it again, and we learn a little bit more about each other. And we do this in little bits of ways. So most of our teams will end up maybe being in the middle of this triangle. Some of us might have a relationship at work that we consciously build up the triangle to become a best friend. Others of us have people that we are just annoying to us and we'd rather have no consistency with them. But it's my belief that if you work with them, they are on your triangle, and we owe it to them to at least have them on the bottom of the triangle, where we treat them kindly, where we have the practice the kind of consistency that they can rely on us for the things that they need to do, and where we keep showing baseline curiosity and openness about them and getting to know them in small ways. We don't have to be best friends with everyone, but we absolutely need to be kind and good to everyone and have healthy relationships in our workplaces and on our teams. And so I have the books there that if those are helpful to you, any. I also have tons of different ways of connecting with me. I would love to connect with all of you. And before we end here, I just want to share with you, I want to kind of make a closer appeal, if you will. And it's that so often I feel like we talk about social health, and we just kind of in our minds are like, oh yeah, she talked about how it matters more that we're connected than that we don't smoke or that we eat. And we like hear that stuff, but do we hear that stuff? And we often just kind of still think that we need to like go drink that kale smoothie, and that is doing more for us than reaching out and connecting with somebody. And sometimes reaching out and connecting is harder. It's harder to because it takes 2 of us. It's harder to like put ourselves out there and build the relationship than it is to just go buy the ingredients and throw them in our blender maybe. But this matters so much to our health, to what we're trying to accomplish on our teams, to what we're trying to do for the people who are in our care. Our social health is as important, if not more important, than our physical health. And so often in our physical health, we understand that when we get on the treadmill and we kind of start sweating, we don't panic. We don't go, oh my goodness, this is awful. I feel like I'm sweating. This can't be good. I didn't mean for this to happen. And we don't jump off the treadmill. When we're lifting our weights, we don't like feel a little strain and go, oh, this is bad, and stop lifting the weight. We understand, don't we? That physical health is on the other side of exertion and strain and a little bit of sweat. We understand that we are increasing our capacity and toning our muscles when we go in and exert ourselves. And yet, so often in our social health, we just anything that's a little uncomfortable, we're like, oh, we roll our eyes. Oh, they want us to share. And we just kind of like get off the treadmill. We're like, oh, that's making me uncomfortable. I don't want to have that conversation. And we just jump off. We get off the mat. We drop the weights. We are lonely. Over half of your teams are lonely. When we are lonely, we are less empathetic, we are less kind, we are less willing to show up, we are less willing, we're less healthy, we're less happy. There is nothing that good is coming from most of us being lonely. Whatever we're doing right now, my friends, is not working. It is not leading to us having a connected, supportive culture. We're going to have to do things a little differently. We're going to have to be willing to try new approaches. We're going to have to be willing to build new muscles. We're going to have to be willing to experiment. We're going to have to be willing to kind of bring in subjects and talks and speeches and connect people in ways that might be a little uncomfortable. And we have to be willing to prioritize our social health as higher than just trying to stay comfortable, just focusing on the convenient, because the ramifications of just catering to comfort and convenience are so tragic for us individually and for us as a society. And so my invitation to you is just please stay on the mat, stay on the treadmill. When it comes to your social health, when it comes to the social health of your teams, please be willing to sweat a little, because on the other side of that is what I want for you, which is I want you to feel so seen in safe and satisfying ways. You deserve to feel that. And I want you to be somebody who's helping bring that to other people. And so may all of you today be inspired in whatever ways with all the different speakers to do whatever you can do to increase the connection in your own life. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Shasta, that was inspirational and educational, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I want to let everybody know that you have graciously accepted an invitation to pop up into the lobby at the Meet Shasta Nelson table, which you will be departing to here momentarily. But before you go, you opened up your talk sharing what sounded like a last week experience of speaking at the Auto Repair Mechanic Association. Forgive me if I butchered that a little bit, but given where my stereotypical mind would go, that probably a bit of a male dominated audience, just at least if history is any predictor of.
It was.
Right. And you had mentioned that there's, usually takes this one, this ambassador, this advocate, this person who's willing to step out onto the skinny branches and show everybody something different. As you are delivering this message or a message similar to this to groups that likely are not experiencing the type of those positive vulnerability emotions that are so critical to the positivity, consistency, vulnerability triangle, when they hear you, what are their reactions? I realize there's varied, but just as a bit of a maybe summary, would love to hear how your message is being received in audiences that this is probably very new for them.
It is. And it is for almost everybody. Because I mean, how many of us have ever had a class on friendship? How many of us have been taught how to do this? How many of us have read a book on this? And most of us are just kind of stumbling our way through. And it's like, maybe we had some modeling, maybe we watched some movies and TV, but we really haven't been taught. And most of us haven't looked at this. And so I love my subject matter. My ability to get up and teach is so fun because most people, this is the first time they're hearing it, right? So their eyes are lighting up. They're all engaged. Yeah, I mean, I had many people come up to me last week and just be like, this is probably one of the most life-changing talks that I have. And, they bring me in to talk about how to build the morale of their shop or how to retain and recruit employees that want to be there. But they end up leaving, of course, with like wanting to do things in their marriage and recognizing their own relationships. And so it's like, I can do this talk every day because it lights me up to know that we're teaching things that people really hunger for. And men, especially, I mean, the hunger is there. We haven't encouraged it. We haven't modeled it. We haven't given permission for it, but it's a human nature need. It's not a gender thing. It's not that women are better at friendships or that we're the ones who need it. This is a human need. And so, yeah, it's my audiences are always, if it takes the brave person, because not everybody can make the connection of like, why do we need that? But once I'm in the room, everyone's like, oh, this is why we need it. So that's what we can all do for our teams, is take that and be brave, because people want it. They really, really want it.
I love it. Shasta, thank you so much.